Hi, welcome to this week's edition of the Wellbeing Show. I'd forgotten what it was then, but there you go. I forget myself sometimes. I've got Sara Davison with me, who's a divorce coach, author, podcaster, general plate spinner by the sounds of it. So we're going to sort of find out about some of the plates that she spins very shortly. This is a pre-record. It's going out as though it's live on Wednesday evening. If you've got questions, do pop them, either send me a WhatsApp 07506 319 745 or pop them in the dialogue boxes underneath whichever platform you're watching this on. And I'll pass them on to Sara and she'll sort of be able to answer them, I'm sure. Although we'll give you her sort of contact details, so you may even want to reach out to her directly yourself. That's enough for me. Sara, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Noel. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Thank you. That's really nice to say. So you're a divorce coach. So tell me what that is.
Well, I suppose I'm best known as the divorce coach, but I cover breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse. So cover
Okay.
any kind of heartbreak, separation, divorce, and toxic relationships, domestic abuse. And I help people to cope better with the emotional roller coaster as well as the practical challenges that people face. So don't give any legal advice or financial advice, very much. It's not counseling or therapy though. For me, it's my style of coaching developed over the last pretty much 3 decades now. It's kind of scary when I think that much. But it's about self-empowerment, really. Work with my clients to empower them to be able to make the shifts and changes themselves. So it's, looking for those fast, positive transformations, those light bulb moments in every session. And each client always gets an action plan at the end of each session. We use different tools and techniques to dial down negative emotions and help them move forward and maintain momentum in between sessions. So yeah, that's kind of what my breakup and divorce coaching and my coaches that I train, that's what we do.
Okay. So just out of interest, what would you say is this sort of major distinction for you between, say, a therapy approach or a coaching approach? What would be sort of your
Well,
understanding?
and it's a really good question because I think there's so many different types of therapy and counselling and so many different
Yeah.
types of coaching. So I don't really want to generalize. It's very difficult because there are some therapists or counsellors that are more directive. But as a coach, and my style of coaching, it's sort of self-help, personal development, self-empowerment. So it's sharing a toolkit of specific tools and techniques for specific scenarios. So we're not generalists. We specialize in breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse. So what that means is it's specific strategies for heartbreak, conflict, parenting, navigating the divorce process, managing the affairs, betrayal. So it's very specific tools and techniques and that's emotional, so to dial down those emotional negative emotions, but also practical solutions and advice. So a lot of practical advice that clients can take home and implement at home might be really small and simple tools, but as you probably know as well, those small things can have the biggest impact sometimes. So it's really sort of looking at empowering clients from our perspective to use the tools themselves, and then they come back to us as and when they need us over that journey.
It's interesting because when one thinks about sort of relationships going through difficulties, I mean, it's often in the news, isn't it? There's sort of big family stuff going on around Prince Harry coming back to see his
Yes.
dad, stuff like that. And I've been interviewed on the radio about sort of, does that mean there's going to be a breakthrough in the family dynamic? And I'm like, not sure that happens that way. But it is interesting that the way we perceive our intimate, romantic, family relationships and the struggles that they go through is, I think, probably shifting in the UK. So we're beginning to understand some more of the tools and resources that are available. So I'm intrigued. I'm always intrigued as to sort of people's personal history. It's a bit of an occupational hazard, I'm afraid. I can't help myself. I guess that's why I trained. But sort of, would you mind telling me something a bit about you, say, for example? What's your sort of background? I know just before the show you said you started off in London. Is that where you were born and brought up in sort of?
No, I grew up in Hertfordshire, actually. My parents still live there. So I lived there for, well, my entire childhood. And then when I got to my 20s, I moved into London after university.
Mhm.
And I set up a business because I'm a total self-help geek. So I'm going to get that out there, like a total
Right.
neuro-linguistic programming nerd. I've loved it since I actually discovered it. And that was in my very early 20s.
Hmm.
And so pretty much straight out of university, I set up a business to fly motivational speakers from the States over to the UK to put on large seminars and workshops. So I was very lucky to work with some really incredible speakers. And then I actually worked alongside some of Tony Robbins's speakers and flew them to the UK, put on events because they weren't really doing it over here. Tony would come once a year, still does. He's absolutely fabulous at what he does. And some of his other speakers wanted to come along as well and do events. So, I mean, because it was my absolute world, I thought, right, I'll set up a business to do that. I think my dad nearly fell off his chair when I said, oh, by the way, I'm setting up a business. He's like, hang on, just pay for your education. And now what? Now what are you doing? But my whole family have been as serial entrepreneurs. Probably because we're totally unemployable, I think. So it was like, okay, well, let's put a business plan together. Let's see how we do it. And anyway, I did very well in our first year because no one else was really doing it, to be honest, Noel. It's easy to be good at something when no one else is really doing it. So there was Paul McKenna. He was doing some events, and I also trained with him. And then he asked me to promote him. So I was lucky enough to study with Paul McKenna and Richard Bandler, who was the founder of NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming. So that's really got a lot of my hypnotherapy and NLP skills from. And then because I was working with a lot of people in that self-help arena, coaching and helping people get the most out of life. So whether that was the Tony Robbins events all over the world or the Michael Breen events and Michael Neal events. I mean, there were so many that I was involved in. So I was very fortunate to have my 20s really immersed in that kind of self-help personal development world. Most of them, as you'll know, are US speakers, and there wasn't much happening over here then. We were a bit of a crest of the wave, which I think also helped my business over here. So yeah, I've been immersed in that for a very long time. And then September the 11th happened, and I remember seeing it on the news and thinking, it's just horrific.
Yeah.
And literally within 24 hours, my whole business had shut down because none of my US speakers would fly anymore.
Yeah.
So it was, I mean, I don't know if you remember back to that time, but it was just everyone just obviously understandably flawed. So overnight, I thought, right, okay, well, that isn't going to work anymore. It was successful, but if I've got no speakers coming from the States, no one will come over. I can't promote them in the UK. So that's when I set up my own coaching business. And I was consulting for Paul McKenna and his business and other speakers over here. Jason Vale, the Juice Master, really good friend of mine, was there at the beginning when he was getting going. Phenomenal guy. Now he has juicing retreats all over the world and really spectacular at helping people with their health. So yes, I mean, I grew my coaching business, and that's when I met my ex-husband who wanted to do some speaking and training. So we set up a business together and we grew it. And then I found out that he no longer wanted to be married to me. It was probably been married about 3 years. My son was 1. And look, I knew it wasn't the perfect relationship. There were a lot of things that made me uncomfortable, but I thought we'd always work it out. You know, we had a global business at this point. We had an office in London, an office in Sydney. We had about 200 and something staff.
Before we get there, I'm just going to stop you because there's a couple of terms. I want to get into that.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm fascinated by that story. You can guess why. Because I think that is the launch for your current period of life and how you manage that as a person and how you incorporate that, I think will have influenced what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, there's a couple of terms you use which I think I understand, but I may not. And I'd like to know more about them. And I think probably people listening would like to know more about them, what the connections are. And you're very comfortable with those terms. So one is NLP, the other is hypnotherapy. And Paul McKenna, I guess people know more for the sort of television hypnosis entertainment stuff. I happen to know he's got sort of more strings to his bow than that. But other people may not know that. So can you tell me first NLP, hypnotherapy, what these things are? What do they mean?
So neuro-linguistic programming, I mean, it's kind of the science of how our mind works. So the unconscious mind, and the tools that I've taken from my NLP training, we share with my clients now, is all about becoming more aware of the things that we do unconsciously. Because once we're more conscious of them, that's when we're able to go in and make shifts and change our behavior if you choose to, right? So that's how you can work with clients to empower them to take their power back. A lot of people don't realize what's going on unconsciously for them. So NLP kind of gives you that ability to break down human behavior a bit and why we do certain things, why we get stuck on certain things, and how to get unstuck from certain things. Whilst I don't teach NLP, that's not my bag, but there's lots of great people doing that out there. What I do teach is, what I use with my clients, is the tools that we use for breakup and divorce and domestic abuse survival is all about sort of understanding what we're doing and our reactions, maybe our coping mechanisms, maybe the way things that might trigger us, a negative reaction in us, the patterns that we might run that just we run unconsciously because we've learned them from parents or teachers, or just from doing the opposite of what we experienced as a child, maybe. So a lot of those things are unconsciously learned. And the hypnotherapy I studied with Paul, which was amazing. Paul's very, well, he's a genius in my mind. I really do think he's a genius. He's also very funny as a presenter and a great person to learn from. I met him when he was doing his tours, stage hypnotic tours, and that shows you're my age, Noel, because that's a long time ago. And since then, obviously, he's written many best-selling books in the self-help personal development world, like, I can make you thin, I can make you confident, I can make you sleep, change your life in however many days. I mean, he's got some great tools and techniques, and found a way to really simplify some quite complicated concepts, I think, and make it accessible to everyone, which I absolutely love. But yes, I studied hypnotherapy with him, and whilst I'm not a hypnotherapist, though, that's again not what I do. I don't hypnotize people, but some of the language patterns that he taught about, sort of really helping people to be very consciously aware of the language and the phrases they use it. So many people will say, "Oh, I'm having a terrible day," and the way we speak to ourselves in our own heads and the commands we give ourselves every day can obviously keep us stuck. So, I don't. So I'm not teaching NLP or hypnotherapy, but a lot of the experiences and the tools that I learned, I've sort of combined with my own life experience to create the toolkit that I share now with other people. So I found it incredibly useful.
Yeah. So sorry to have interrupted your narrative about your story. I wanted to hear it, but also I think it's quite important to just check some of these words so that people understand them. And understand what they're about. So both NLP and hypnotherapy are therapeutic tools. They're schools of thought. They're bodies of knowledge which are practiced to help people gain insight and change behavior.
And because I was working in that arena for so long, I was very lucky to have access to some really incredible people in their field. So, I mean, yes, there were those people, but there's also a man called Stephen Russell, who I don't know if you remember, Noel, but he was known as the Barefoot Doctor. He'd written 14 books. And he was very much more sort of spiritual, but also energy healing. It was fascinating. I mean, he was a very dear friend of mine. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago now, but way before his time. But he had a big impact on what I do. And some other people like Seika Nikolic, he's a healer. And I know it might sound a bit woo-woo, but I mean, I didn't believe any of these things, so I'd had first-hand experience of them. And unfortunately, my mum had a brain hemorrhage a long time ago now. It's about, must be coming up to 30 years. And I was working with Paul McKenna at the time, And he said to me, she was in hospital, severely ill, and they said, look, she's not going to make it. She's not going to make it. And my mum was very healthy and fit, so this was completely out of the blue. Just one night, just collapsed, and she was in hospital, and that was it. And they were saying, come and say goodbye. Now, Barefoot Doctor really helped me through that, but also Saker as well. Saker said, when your mum's out of hospital, bring her to me. And Saker was recommended to me by Paul McKenna. He'd met her on a TV show about freaks and their unusual powers or whatever he'd done for TV. And Saker was one of those people. And she's an energy healer, but she's with a difference. And I took my mum to see Saker 3 months after she'd had the, must be about 8 months after she'd had her aneurysm. And at this point, she couldn't speak. She was paralyzed. She had no control over her body. I mean, she just didn't. And within 6 weeks, she started to get her movement back. And then she started to speak again. And she defied all the odds. Now, there was a combination of acupuncture, of reflexology, cranial sacral therapy. And then after we managed to get Saker, that's when it really accelerated. But I've sort of worked with so many different people and tried so many different things that I think that all of those have an influence on what I do. And I'm always learning. Like, I always think there's more I can learn, more that I can, use to help my clients or the people that I speak to through my social media, because my private practice is quite small these days because I do so many. You mentioned I juggle a lot of plates, but it's all about getting the best information with the best people.
I mean, that sort of, I would call that help-seeking behavior, that inquisitive mind, that help-seeking is, it's well researched to be a positive tool to have, and probably one of the most important tools, I think, in life. It really is.
But I also think it's essential because there are a lot of sharks in my industry of like the self-help world, as in any industry, right?
There's a lot of snake oil in healing, full stop. I mean, I think, it's same in my profession as well. There's a lot of people who think absolute junk. So but you're aware, I think, on these things. Definitely.
We'll come back to that a bit later on, maybe when we talk about domestic abuse therapists. We'll cover that one maybe if you remind me. But well,
when we talk about domestic abuse, I'm going to sort of, I mean, because it's such a serious topic, and we do need to think about it in safe practice and in the context of safe practice. So I'm glad you're mentioning that, but we will come to that. But sort of continuing your journey about your exploration.
So I just think it's really important. So everyone that I work with are people that I've used for either myself or my family. So that's something that's really important to me. I'd never recommend anyone without actually experiencing it and having first-hand experience of it. So that's something that's really, really important to me. That's
so you took your mum to this healer. This helped, but you'd also been involved with her in a lot of other things. How is she now, by the way? She's
amazing. I mean, walking, talking, shopping. Within a year, she was back to, I mean, never 100%, but I would say 90% back to where she was, and that was a miracle as far as the medical team were concerned. And I was that annoying sort of relative of a patient that I wouldn't let them talk about how she was close to death's door every morning on their rounds. We'd have several heated debates because I believe that the hearing is the last sense to go, and they can hear that. And my mum, the last thing she'd said was she'd been in a coma for a while, and I happened to be at her bedside when she came out of it. She sat up and said, "I'm not going to die, Sara. Why is everyone making a fuss?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness, you're okay." And then she crashed down. She didn't come out of that. She didn't speak again for about 7-8 months. So that was her last thought. And I wanted that to be what she was programming her own mind with. Not this, well, it looks like she could die any moment. And these things are still, I just didn't want that. So we had a big clash with doctors, and they saved her life. And, I will forever be grateful. But in the rehab centres, we have very different approaches. So I would ask for this acupuncture lady to come in, Gloria Else, who was amazing. And she would work with my mum, but they would hate it. They would say, "This is really scaring other patients. It's not normal." And it was a long time ago, right? It was 30 years ago, and they would make a big deal of it. And it was very difficult to get mum the help that I believed would help her. but it was starting to show results. And then obviously when we went to
I mean, I
the
think it's interesting if we go back even further in time, because I am ancient, but it used to be the case, for example, doctors would argue that parents shouldn't be with their sick children in hospital. And it took advocates to challenge that and say that's not true. And we now have a huge body of evidence to show that children heal quicker if their parents are with them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you're one of those advocate sort of patients that's helped change things, which is a really good thing. And
Yeah.
the more with that dreaded word holistic, but the more holistic we are in terms of approaching healing and growth and development, the better, without a doubt.
Yeah.
We'll come to the conversation about snake oil sellers later, but I think establishing those principles are really important. And also for me as a healer, it's establishing the importance of healing relationships with other human beings is important.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of health professionals are become disconnected from that relational aspect. Maybe necessarily so because they want to objectify and look at stuff. And I understand that. But I think human beings exist within a healthy network or an unhealthy network. And the healthier the network, the more likely is somebody's going to recover better. And we're only beginning to understand things like it's shocking to know this, but it's a fact that a lot of the hospital practices were killing people. So it's only within the last 4 years, I think it is, that patients are encouraged to get out of bed in a hospital. Because if you stay in bed, you're more likely to die. We now have the evidence for that. Get out of bed. You're more likely to live. Do you know what I mean? And it's only in the last 4 years that sort of policies have changed. So I think it's really important to sort of acknowledge that. I'm interested in, for you as an individual, where did you get this sense of questing and healing from? Where does that come from in you as a person, do you think?
I think for me, in my childhood, I went to a very strict girls' school.
Okay.
And it was all about conforming and fitting in. And I was just never happy because I don't think I ever fitted in. I was like round peg, square hole, supposed to fit, doesn't fit, trying to fit, pretending I fit, not feeling comfortable. And, obviously at school, they're always the really popular kids and the really sporty kids and the really academic kids. And I was none of those. And my belief coming out of school was that I was never going to be truly successful in any shape or form of the word because I was never a prefect, because I wasn't highly intelligent. I wasn't in my class. I'd only ever got a C plus from Miss Newhouse in my English lessons. That was that I could triumph that I got a C plus. Even though I really tried hard and I put everything into it and I tried to be more creative, Sarah, or, Sarah must try harder and give examples. I did all those things. It didn't make a difference. And I just felt that to me, I would never be as truly successful or, in any area of my life as the other people would be. And then sounds kind of crazy to a lot of people I know, but then I had the opportunity. My dad came across Tony Robbins, who's the world's #1 sort of coach, I guess, in America. And it is very American, totally accept that. And he said, look, I think you and your brother should try this. If you don't like it, great. But he'd had the opportunity to go on it. He was working with some clients in America, and him and my mum had gone on and they saw some value they thought that might help us. And that first event I went to in Brussels, where it was a long time ago, so there were only probably about 250 people in the audience with Tony, which now he sells out, 100,000 stadium, no problem. That totally changed the trajectory of my life. And not because I mean, a lot of people go to those events and just want to be like Tony and be around Tony. And he's a phenomenal human being. But the content that he was sharing, I felt like it took the blinkers off, because he was talking about you can be whatever you want to be, but you do have to step up. You have to plan it and you have to step up. You have to take massive action. And I was like, well, I don't want to just do this average thing. I want to do more. I want to have my own business, but obviously I can't have my own business. So I'd like to be, have a team of people. I'd like to make a difference to people. I'd like to use these tools that I'm learning to help others. And I literally left that event and used the tools. And I think this is probably the defining difference in my experience between anyone that learns something. You can learn it and then you can have all the certificates, have a library full of books, all the other things you might have. But if you're not using it or you're not
Yes.
making changes in your life, it's not going to have an impact.
It's the
Absolutely.
actions that you take.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
get that. I mean, I think there's, that's unequivocally a statement of fact, isn't it? It's what you
Yeah.
do, not what you think, not what you feel, and there's plenty of evidence for that. So,
But I
okay.
do think that most people most people think if I've read it or I've done it or I've attended it, it will have an impact. And for me, that dissipates very quickly and life goes back to normal. You have to step up, you have to be brave, you have to make those changes. And I think that's where my passion comes from going, I'm going to implement this stuff and see. And then when you get a taste of it working, that's kind of addictive. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, well, then I can dream big and create that as a reality. And it doesn't happen overnight. A lot of people say to me now, oh, it's all right for you, you're successful and you've done this. This is 30 years of, and I still work crazy hours, but I love it. It's who I am, but it's not overnight success. It's 30 years of hard work, trying, testing, being not afraid to fail. I think if you're scared of failure or you let one thing take you out, like when I lost my business at 24 because of 9/11, I could have stayed down, right? Because I was like, oh, well, I gave it my shot. It was really good and that's it. That was it. But I didn't. I got back up again. I'm not saying it was easy, but I got back up again because I had that belief that I'd already learned I could do it once. If you can do it once, you can do it again.
Yeah.
And from interviewing loads of people on my podcast, as I'm sure you've noticed, it's that you don't give up. It's about, right, okay, well, if I can do it once I get knocked down, I will get back up again and off I go. So it's learning from those things, I think.
Yeah, and I'm endlessly fascinated by human beings, full stop, but I'm particularly attracted to this whole notion of transformation of difficult experiences. And some people do that and some people survive. And I'm not questioning or saying one is more valuable than another. I just have an interest in one, that's all. Thinking of that and sort of what led sort of more towards where you are now, you had a relationship with a guy that had some issues, but you thought you were working through them together. And then it turns out he wasn't, he was on a different trajectory, and you had a child between you. So I'm guessing that was quite a challenge at the time. I'm not asking you to go into massive detail about it, but I think it is relevant to the fact that of where you work now, the field that you work in now. Are you okay to talk about that experience and sort of what you learned from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you go through something like that, I mean, I found out pretty much overnight that no longer did he want to be married to me, but also he's madly in love with somebody else. She was 12 years younger, stunningly beautiful. That never helps, Noel, by the way, never helped. And pregnant a few months after that. So the whole thing hit me like a freight train.
I really feel for you. That was like, that's like how many kicks in the teeth in one really short space of time. I'm sorry about that. That must have been.
Oh, thank you. No, I mean, he then moved her into the penthouse apartments where I was living on the ground floor with my son. And he also made a director of our company. So it did get slightly worse because then I had to live, in the same environment. And obviously we had a business together and I was running the business. So I had to go in, and obviously she was then in there. And he was very happy. He was like madly in love. And we then had 2.5 years of very, very difficult court battle to work out the finances. And it was just horrific. I was doing a lot of that ugly crying on the bathroom floor.
Yeah.
I was doing
Fair
a lot
enough.
of phoning my mum.
Yeah.
Yeah. I phoned my mum at 2 a.m. and anyone else that would listen. And even Paul McKenna was in America at that point. So I would phone him because he was, it was 7 or 8 hours. And that was really helpful having him on speed dial. I can tell you, he really helped. But there were a lot of things that you go through thinking, gosh, I'm a coach. I've been coaching for about 15 years at this point. I should be able to manage my emotional state, but I literally am a wreck because my whole life as I know it, my future, I'm a single mum. I thought he loved me. I thought he was my best friend. The pain is overwhelming. The fear is overwhelming. The court battle was terrifying. It was very aggressive. And I realized that my relationship had actually been very toxic. And like most people coming out of abusive relationships, they don't realize what you're in until you're out. And even then, it's tough to pretty much take that on board. So I was sort of going through this whole process, and I remember I had to go to our Australian office.
Especially maybe as a successful, intelligent businesswoman who
Yeah, I felt like I
imagine
was so
herself
ashamed.
as, there's no way I'd be in this sort of situation.
Yeah, that
Is
these
that
things
the sort
don't
of
happen to
narrative?
people like
Yeah.
me. Yeah, I mean, I literally, my mom and dad are so happily married still now. We're 50 years together. The most lovely, kind, gentle human beings. You know, I've never experienced anything like this. You know, I had the fairy tale for my parents, how they were in their relationship, still are today, which is very lucky. And obviously, when my mom was ill, my dad was by her side, and we all stuck together as a family. Me and my brother were super close. So this sort of aggressive nature, and like it was just, it didn't have that in my toolkit. It wasn't a life experience I'd gone through. I'd never met anyone that had treated anyone like that. So for me, it was really tough and alien, and scary. And yeah, so I had a moment where I went to Australia to our office, and it was in Sydney, and I was staying in Balmoral Beach. So if anyone's been there, it's the most beautiful place, like white sand. So if you go down to the front, and there's cockatoos that fly down like sparrows or pigeons here, you know, and they're everywhere. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this place is amazing. And I've been there before because we had an office there, but there was a little part of the beach there, Balmoral Beach, which was just stunning. And I used to go and sit there, and on one of these days I'd walk down and I sat on the beach, and I remember I had tears streaming down my face. And I was like, this is so much pain. It's so much pain. Everyone knows what's happened. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. My heart is broken. You know, I can't fathom it. What's going to become of me? What's going to become of my son? How do we get through it? How do I move forward? Will anyone ever love me again? All these questions in my head. As anyone who's gone through or is going through a breakup will go, yeah, I get that. That's where I've been. And then I suddenly thought, why is this happening to me? And I had this sort of epiphany moment that, well, if I was going to go through all this pain, then it had to be for a reason.
Okay.
And I needed to take this pain, learn something from it, and then use it to help other people. So it's that pain to power journey you were talking about. Like, this is the only way I can see that I can not only survive, but thrive after this if I make it my mission. So that's when I looked for help, but there really wasn't anything specific to, you know, how do you deal with your husband leaving you with someone who's beautiful, 12 years younger, living upstairs, you've run a business together, all those different dynamics just didn't exist. So I was like, right, I'm going to have to create my own tools from
Can
my
I also
15.
add another layer of meaning? Because my experience, and I don't know if this was your experience, but my experience is also, as a woman, you would have been automatically casting the victim role. The idea that you might suddenly flip that, because I know you're just about to tell me how you flipped it. It's like, and turned it around, because that's what you do in NLP. But I guess the messages you would have been getting was that you were the victim, you were going to have to try and scrabble for as much as you possibly could get, and da 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 da. Was that part of the narrative that was going on as well? That
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't remember. I don't remember feeling as in a victim from just because I was a woman. I remember feeling a victim because of the way I'd been treated, the way I was being treated, and the realizing the person I married probably never existed. And
okay?
it was more of the, I think I felt like I'd been gut punched and winded, and that was more the. But yeah, I do think there is a lot of stigma around that, and you know, men cheat is more, I suppose, widely accepted and comfortable concept than women cheating. So it's like, oh, you've been cheated on, and well, it was an obvious upgrade, Noel. So that was very hard to take as well. I kind of look at her and go, yeah, I kind of get it, but hey, this doesn't stop it hurting, but it makes it hurt even more. And I just remember I just like that was when my motto was born: screw you, watch this.
Mm-hmm.
And that has powered me every single step of the way since. And it's not a revenge thing. It's like, however many attempts to break me, and there were so many unkind, unnecessary things that go on through any divorce process, to be honest. And I don't think necessarily, I think a lot of the law firms get involved. It becomes, you know, a lot more of a bigger thing. There's fuel poured onto that fire. I just think there were so many things that happened that I was just, how many punches do I need to take? And then from a lot of my support, so obviously the Barefoot Doctor was there for me, Paul McKenna, like a lot of my friends in the industry, they stepped up for me in a massive way and, you know, reassured me that, you know, I was, you know, I could do this, but also that it's not what happens to you in life that defines you, it's what you do about it that makes you the person you become.
Yeah, without doubt, without doubt. Yeah, without doubt. And that's true. I would say, you know, from my clinical practice, that's true. Doesn't matter when the terrible things happen, even if you're a child, later on as an adult, you can manage that experience. You can relate to it in a very different way, and you can transform it. So, I don't necessarily need to get into the sort of details of the issues that were between the two of you. You've mentioned it. There is a, you know, in this whole area of relationship breakup and divorce, there are issues of power, there are issues of money, there are issues of society expectations, and then there's also risk issues. So let's talk about that a bit, because there is issues in and I've seen this quite a lot, and I think there is a difference in terms of structural differences in society here that we're going to talk about a little bit. But women who go through a divorce with men who are very powerful, and then those men get really good lawyers and they use their business tactics to destroy the woman that they used to be married to so that they can get a good deal from the divorce. Okay. I see that a lot, and it's really unpleasant. And I think a lot of the women I see that go through that are really shocked at seeing this other side of somebody that they were once thought they loved.
Yeah.
And what they then see is this sort of really militant, brutal, horrific attack, which is designed for one thing, which is to maximize profit. That's all, really. You're nodding away. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to maximize profit, but I think to destroy. I think if you're divorcing a healthy person, it's all about finding a fair compromise. When you're divorcing a toxic partner, it's about total annihilation, causing as maximum suffering and pain as possible through any tactic. And yes, you're right, there are specific law firms you can go to who will quite happily become the mouthpiece of abuse for a perpetrator that has the money to pay for that. And they will suggest tactics and ways of going about things. And that is something that I campaign at government level about changing. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about, because I spend my weeks working with not just my private clients, but my whole coaching schools clients. And we every day there are scenarios. And also I'm part of groups that are campaign groups as well, like Shira, that we campaign for helping victims of abuse through the family courts. I speak to certain family judges who've worked in courts that I've been dragged through to highlight the disgusting nature of the way the system works as well. And some of them are even horrified by what goes on in their own courts, to be honest. So there's a lot of challenges in the family courts. So there's a lot of challenges in the justice system. And I think the problem is that as a layperson on the outside, when we go through a breakup, divorce, and you're thrown into that legal world, firstly, the jargon is very intimidating, it's very old-fashioned, doesn't make a lot of sense. And that kind of makes you feel like you have to give complete authority to the lawyers to do whatever they need to do for you, because you don't really understand it. However intelligent and educated you are, you haven't done a 4-year law degree and practice for X number of years. So how could you possibly understand the terms, you know, even like what's a QC or a, you know, or a barrister versus a lawyer, or mediation versus an FDR, or I mean, there's so many different terminologies and phrases. It's kind of set up in a way to put you on the back foot and be submissive. And then it opens up opportunities for people to manipulate that. If you've got a very aggressive law firm coming at your law firm, you know, it's terrifying. And one of the things that I just cannot get my head around to this day is that they send such aggressive, threatening letters, which are nothing short of abusive and bullying. And if you in your job, Noel, sent a letter to a client like that, or a teacher or an accountant or anyone in business sent a letter like that to anyone, you'd be struck off. No doubt about it. Whereas in family law, it's, you know, go for it. If you're acting on the behalf of your client, well, no, Like, how do you sleep at night? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of challenges about what is right and wrong, in my opinion. And there's a lot of good family lawyers out there that won't engage in that. But the problem is the perpetrators go to the ones that will. And I spend my time picking those people up off the floor. And there are, people commit suicide from this, people have PTSD from this, people have all sorts of trauma locked in from having those experiences. So much so that if they get an email from their ex years later, it still triggers a panic reaction. This is not okay. It's not okay. So we need to really, change needs to happen for sure.
And until we can change those systems, and they do need changing. I mean, I think family court there are significant problems. My background is child protection work as well, and we haven't discussed the impact upon children in this situation. We know, you and I know, professionals know that the only successful divorce is when there's children involved, is one which is child-centered and involves love, compassion, thoughtfulness, kindness, and maintenance of these love relationships, because those are what are in the best interest of the children. But we are talking about those group of breakups where there's a bad actor involved, genuinely. And it's very difficult, I think, for people to understand what that means, particularly if you've been gradually coached or groomed by your bad actor into an unhealthy relationship, which is often, I guess, where we find people. And I work with women coming out of those relationships who are struggling with this. How did this happen to me? And then they're in this legal process which repeats the abuse, if you like, and repeats.
It perpetuates it. And there's surveys that show that 82% of victims of abuse going through the family court system were re-traumatized by the family court system, not by their ex. It was the court system, the individuals operating within it. And I suffer from CPTSD from the court system myself. So I totally understand the horrors that they can inflict on victims of abuse and their children. I'm glad that there's a very recent case. I don't know if you've seen it, Kate Knighton MP recently. She was coercively controlled by her ex, who was an MP, and this is just out recently all over the press, actually. She did a Channel 4 news programme about it 2 days ago, I think. Okay. She was raped and abused by her ex-husband. She then divorced him, and she was fighting because the custody of the child was the issue, where the child was going to live, and the court ruled, and this is a landmark hearing, that the father should not have access, because at the moment the court work on presumption of contact, which means both parents should have contact at any cost, at all cost. It doesn't matter if they're an abuser, a perpetrator, convicted, it doesn't matter. There are a lot of very high profile cases, you can just Google it, they're everywhere, daily, about judges awarding full access to their children unsupervised to perpetrators. So again, this is the first case that has happened where they've said no. It's a very high profile case, and hopefully a landmark for people coming up behind. So I'm really excited about that. She had Dr. Charlotte Proudman as a barrister, so that I'm sure that helped a lot. She's a phenomenal force for good in that arena too.
Good. No, I hadn't seen the case. Thanks. I'll still go and have a look at it. It's really useful stuff. But I totally agree. Again, my company's still involved in sort of working with vulnerable children and vulnerable adults, and these types of issues come up all the time, and looking at access through court orders, etc. There has been a presumption of equal access, but there shouldn't be, without a doubt. Not if we're going to think about children.
There is a problem with the court experts.
Just the term you use, I want to make sure people understand. Sorry about this, but you use the term CPTSDs, just so that people understand that. C at the beginning of PTSD, you might think you know what PTSD is, but it means post-traumatic stress disorder, which is how we respond to a stressful event, an overwhelmingly stressful event, and how we live with it in a way that is unhelpful to us. CPTSD is complex responses to traumatic events and how we encode it. And it's very common. This re-traumatization thing through institutional processes is in some ways maybe more common that
There's a new term, actually. No, I don't know if you've heard of it yet, but it's relatively new out there. But court and perpetrator induced trauma, which is CPIT.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that's probably, similar along those, it's encompassed by those. But state sanctioned abuse is one of the biggest national scandals that we have in this country, generated by the family court system that we have. And it's not just here, it's in Australia, it's in America. I mean, it's widespread around the world. But unfortunately, the systems are, it's set up with a lot of conflict of interest, which leads to corruption. And court experts, and I say that if you're not watching the video, I'm putting it in I got it's in quotes. It's the court experts are often the source of some of these troubles, which has been widely documented in the press. There's been a lot of campaigns to reveal not just the unregulated experts, but some of the regulated ones doing things and claiming. I've just seen so many horrors, Noel. I can't tell you the horrors I've witnessed from court experts writing reports that are so factually incorrect and sometimes just outright lies that are then submitted to court and believed by judges because they don't know the situation as well as these so-called experts that are going in.
So you just have to look at the gene pool that the judges come from to understand why they can be misled. I'm sorry, but
well, that's a big part of my point. Who would like to be a judge?
The whole system, is problematic. Right? Why do we only have less than 1% convictions for rapes? Because the whole system is designed not to convict.
Highly misogynistic, and there's a lot of conflict and a lot of controlling behaviours within the court system. So
let's just talk more about the solution, because I think both of us could get onto quite angry spaces about this. So I'm somebody who grew up in domestic abuse, so I watched my father sort of be really unpleasant to us and to my mum, and I'm sort of quite an advocate in this area. But I want to discuss some of these things and make it very clear. This is the health warning bit. So people should understand that controlling and coercive behavior in intimate partner relationships is now illegal, and quite rightly so. So that if you have a partner who is telling you who your friends should be, who gets angry with you when you have a different opinion to them, etc., all of these things are now illegal. If you find yourself, folks, in a relationship where you are frightened of the person you're supposed to love, there's something gone wrong there and you need help. Okay. You should never, ever, I mean, sometimes we might have an argument with the person that we love and we just sort of get a little bit anxious about it, but we shouldn't have a background of fear of somebody that we're in a love relationship to. And that should never be happening. And if that's happening, folks, you need to get out of Dodge. You need to get somewhere safe. And also I say this as a therapist as well. I mean, historically, psychotherapy was a perpetrator of these situations, trying to help people fix relationships that were dangerous. If your relationship is dangerous, it needs to end. You don't work on fixing it. You work on getting to safety. That's what you do. And you get the person who's making you afraid, who is dangerous, arrested. That's what you do. You don't go to couples counselling. You get to safety, you look after yourself and you look after your kids. Sorry.
Sorry. I mean, I think it's, as you know, it's very difficult to leave those scenarios, and it's very difficult to even sort of spot the signs necessarily, because a lot of clients, like including myself, will believe it was our fault when we're in it. A lot of it was, well, I'm an idiot and I'm not good at this and I'm not good at that. And I was running a big business with my excellent staff, and and from the outside, no one would have known. It's very much behind closed doors, and it happens to everyone. But it is difficult to leave, and it can take up to 8 times to leave statistically. I'm actually the patron of a domestic abuse charity called the Dash Charity. And the statistics are absolutely shocking. I mean, and they do such good work supporting people, but again, the front line, in my opinion, the front line, if you are struggling with anything or you think you might be, then find somewhere safe to make a call to your local domestic abuse charity, because in the UK, we are very fortunate that we have the best domestic abuse that I have seen anywhere in the world, best domestic abuse support and charity hotlines and and support. So there is a lot of support out there. And what they will do immediately is do a risk assessment. So rather than you trying to leave or trying to tell your partner you're not happy, that can escalate things very quickly and put you and your children in danger. First of all, go to a friend's house or whatever, use their phone so they can't be traced, but just make the call, get your risk assessment done, because then you're on the books and they're not going to tell your partner that you've done that. It's confidential. So you can do that. And then if anything does happen, or they can help you plan to leave, but if anything did happen, then you'd already be flagged up. So you get a much better response rate if you've been registered and you're already down as a risk on their files. And plus they'll give you the advice and support you need, and they will believe you. And I think that's the other thing. Friends and family might go, oh, they seem so charming and they seem so friendly, and are you sure you're not just being a bit difficult? And then you worry about the kids and everything. So they're probably the first port of call, I would say.
Yeah, and I need to underscore that. And just because I get annoyed about these things, I'm quite passionate, but the highest level of risk is when you're leaving. So it's really important to underscore what Sara's saying, is that thinking about that and getting to a place of safety needs a lot of management.
Yeah.
And also when you're investigating sites like Refuge, etc., they always have leave no trace buttons. So just make sure you use those, and they'll clear your cache and things like that, so that your abuser can't find out what you're doing. But I think it's really good advice to go somewhere, like your local library, if your friend can't be, and make a call, withheld numbers, all that sort of stuff. So, there is help, is essentially. So you moved into, I'm just aware of time. I told you we'd run out of time. We are running out of time. And I think you've raised some really important points, which I'm just going to sort of, if you like, just underscore that nobody expects to be in an abusive relationship. It's not what you plan. Well, a small number of people might expect to, but most people don't. And abusers don't just pop up full blown at the beginning of a relationship and behave like total horrors. They groom you over time, and you get to and that whole process that you've described, where you begin to tell yourself that it's your own fault, etc., and that you deserve this in some way. That's the process of grooming. So people should understand that it takes time for you to be groomed into a position where you are vulnerable enough and controlled enough, so that you will tolerate the intolerable. And it's really important, folks, that you find a way of forgiving yourself for that. It's
also, I think it's important to say it's not your fault. It's definitely not your fault. So, we, as victims of abuse, maybe we can enable it because we don't have the firm boundaries, or it's not safe to say no, or to put a boundary in place, which is quite often the case. Or the consequences are too high to you for doing that, but it's not your fault. And I think when you speak to somebody that really understands abuse, whether it's the charity support or somebody that's specialist in it, they'll understand that. And so find that person, find that support, because just having someone say, look, it's not your fault, I understand, and you're not going mad, is something that is like, wow, okay, great. Now you can start that healing process. Now you can start working out how you leave, how is safe to leave, when it's going to be safe, and what you need to do before you leave, because quite often there's some planning that needs to go into that.
Yeah. Well, there will be, just to keep yourself safe. And so you go through this experience, you go through this, I guess, this personal awakening and discovery about what actually has been happening to you and the shocking reality of it. And you go through this sort of very traumatic court process. And yet you flip that, you decide that, you're on this beach in Australia with cockatoos flying around, and you go, right, sod it, I'm not going to go under, which is great. And what then did you do? What were the next steps for you in terms of where you went with that sort of decision, if you like?
So for me, it became developing the tools that were going to get me through. So that screw you, watch this is like, you will not break me unless I choose. You can't, it's like sticks and stones, unless you give your inside sort of your peace of mind and your inside soul to somebody willingly, they can't take that from you. Okay. So for me, it was like, you can throw all the names, all the abuse, be as aggressive, do the most horrific things, threaten me with whatever it is. And I can be on my knees, but you will never break me. I will always find a way to get back up, and I will get back up and I will learn from it, which will make me stronger. And I will take this and I will share that information with as many people on this planet as I possibly can, so that nobody has to go through what I went through and feel there's no help, no solution, and no way forward, and no light at the end of the tunnel. And so that, for me, as you could probably hear still now, is my absolute driving force in life. So I went about looking at, what do I wish that I had access to?
Okay.
Well, first of all, it was, I want to be able to speak to someone. If you want to give up smoking, or you want to lose weight, there's so many groups you can join.
There really are.
Heartbreak, nothing. Literally, apart from therapy, but I'm talking, so like accessible online support. You can go and you can talk to other people, you can share your story, nothing. So we created those so that people have somewhere they can go to have that help. The one-to-one coaching, so that you can get someone to deep dive into your scenario and literally use these specific tools. Like, okay, he's cheated on me. She's younger than me. She's beautiful. How do I cope? Right. Here's some specific tools that will help you with that. You know, I've got extreme conflict, or I don't know where to find a good lawyer who understands domestic abuse. There's very few. I mean, I'm talking less than a handful that I know of that I would recommend my clients to, but there are some. So who would you know, because that will determine the success of your case and whether you get to keep your children or not these days, which is, I'm not joking, it's a very serious issue we have in this country, with children being handed over to the perpetrator if you're a victim of abuse. And then, you know, how to survive and thrive after that. You can go on and be happier from a breakup, from any kind of heartbreak, but also a divorce, even a toxic relationship. You can go on and rebuild, so you're happier, stronger, more confident. You can find new love. You can be even happier than you've ever been before. So they're the tools that I created, and we have lots of different ways, whether it's retreats, workshops, online webinars, in all those different areas, so that, you know, if people want that content, it's there, and they can access it, and they can use it, and they can take those tools and transform themselves. Okay. But I soon realized that my one-on-one coaching practice was not going to be able to reach every human on the planet, Noel. So that's when I set up my training school. So now we've trained it's coming up to 600 coaches, I think, in 25 different countries. So it's 5 different continents we're in. My books, I've written 2 books. They sell all over the world. My podcast is over 500,000 downloads, 500,000 downloads, and it was listed in the top 10% of all Buzzsprouts podcasts of 2023, which is amazing. So, you know, we're doing a lot of things to get everything out there, and we're now going into businesses as well, which is another really exciting area, because a lot of HR directors are now seeing the impact on staff. Like anyone who's been through a breakup will know, if you're going through a breakup, you can't focus on your work or leading a team or being inspiring or even making basic decisions. So we're actually, a lot of our services at corporates are coming to us. We're working with Dell, working with advertising agencies to help their teams to, you know, deal with breakups, and the company are including that as part of their employee benefit packages now, which is really great to see that. And the domestic abuse advice has changed last year to say that all companies, the statutory guidance is that they should have a domestic abuse policy. And that means that they've got a procedure if there is a member of staff dealing with that. And obviously we're the people that can actually provide the support, not the policy, but the support to get them back up and running. So it's great to be able to see that, as the only global providers of breakup, divorce and domestic abuse coaching, that we're able now to get out there, and we're really seeing it. We're not there yet. No, my mission isn't complete, but we're getting there, and we're building it. And every day we get messages from people saying that we're helping them and even saving lives, which is just the best feeling in the world. So yeah, I just love what we're doing, and my whole team are amazing. Just really passionate people. I'm lucky to work with just some really dedicated, passionate people who've got similar mission to me, wanting to help and make the world a better place for people dealing with those issues.
It's a wonderful story. I mean, it's a horrific area of human experience, without doubt. And I you know, I can't underscore enough to people, if you're listening and this is triggering you and you're thinking about your relationship and you feel unsafe in it, it is really important to start getting help, and that there is help out there. Your story is extraordinary, without a doubt, and really gives hope, I think, to people that things can change with the appropriate support and help. And also, I think it's realistic as well, because it's not easy. Sort of,
No, it's
it
not
really
easy.
isn't.
But it's definitely possible, and you can speed it up, and it doesn't need to take so many years to make progress. You know, there's lots of things you can do straight away.
I think what's exciting is, do you know why we beat what they used to call Neanderthals? Do you know? Because Neanderthals are cleverer than us. They had bigger brains than humans.
Ah, okay.
They literally, and they had better tools, but they were less social. So they didn't share their cleverness with each other. Whereas what we do as humans is we share our cleverness with each other, and we share our experience with each other because we're much more social. I think one of the saddest things about abuse, failure in these intimate relationships, domestic abuse, and abuse for children is that people can end up being very isolated on their own. What it seems to me you're doing is the opposite of that. You're just going, no, there's a lot of us around, and we're not going to be
Yeah.
ashamed. We're not going to be hidden. We're
No.
actually going to share with each other what we've learned about what is successful. And that's genius in my book, absolute genius.
I think that's what sort of sets us apart is that, and I do a lot of this on my Instagram feed, is it's self-empowerment, and
Yeah.
it's, you know, redesigning your life just the way you want it. And we all have that control. It's like when I went to my Tony Robbins seminar way back in my very early 20s, and I went, oh, so that's possible. And you're never too old to learn this stuff. You know, it can make a difference today. And it also can really empower your kids. And
Yeah.
you know, I'm a big believer that divorce does not have to damage kids. I talk about this a lot in the media because a lot
No,
of people,
that's right. Yeah.
yeah, oh, getting divorced, it's bad for your kids. It's like, no, it can be a valuable life lesson. And also having a toxic parent is not the end of the world. If you have a healthy parent who understands this and can teach you to spot the signs and what I call hone your radar to those signs of abuse so that they don't make the mistakes that I made and other people listening may have made when they choose their life partner, right? So again, this can be a gift that you learn from, and actually maybe it's hard to see right now if you're going through it, but and I know it definitely is at times, but you know, it is a gift that you can give your kid a valuable life lesson that makes them stronger and make better decisions as they grow. So, you know, that there is hope, and that sort of self-empowerment, that help is just, you know, that's what I try to sort of get across on my Instagram every day with different videos and messages. So that's something that's really important to me. It's, you know,
Well, I'm going to share something with you just because it's relevant. But my mum left my father, which was great. It was such a relief, and I'm very proud of her. She's been dead for a long time, but she was of a particular generation of Irish Catholic. You know, in theory, she should have got permission from the Pope to do all of this stuff, but she didn't. She knew what she needed to do. She had to leave us behind for a couple of years, which was very difficult for her. But she did the right thing for her, got to safety. And I look back on that experience now as an adult male child, and I'm very proud of that woman.
That takes a lot of courage.
Real lot of courage, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To do
And I
that.
think everyone that has left an abuser will resonate with the strength and courage it takes to do that, because it's never easy. And you're programmed to think you can't survive and it's not going to work, and there are children involved. It's, you know, it's very difficult. So yeah, your mom sounds like an incredible woman.
It's very inspiring, and yourself as well. You're built in the same mold, I would say. So and a wonderful sort of sharing with you today, Sara. How do people get hold of you? Have you got a website?
Yes, the website is saradavison.com. Instagram is Sara Davison Divorce Coach, and the podcast is Heartbreak to Happiness. So yeah, check any of those out.
Right. Look, it's been a real pleasure for me to have you on today. And we might circle back in 6 months' time, see how things are going, and sort of check in on the progress of things and see what's changed in the law. I'm with you that there needs to be significant changes. There are sort of structural problems that exist within the legal system, within society, that need to be challenged. And you're also working on that, which is very inspiring stuff. I hope everybody's sort of been sort of engaged with this. We will put underneath all the relevant domestic abuse charities and the information, so that if you're resonating with this, you're stuck in these circumstances yourself, then just know there is help, and get in touch, as Sara said, around the charities. That would be your first port of call. And be aware that there are statutory bodies that exist as well. Every local authority has a domestic abuse reduction panel. I know because I've sat on one in a local authority. And so we wish you well. We definitely wish you well, but just you're not alone, folks. You're really not. All right. Going to say goodbye for now. You say there, Sara, and then I'll catch you all on the next show. So goodbye for now.